The Pokemon TCG has been growing at a very rapid rate, and a lot of people are getting into the game for the very first time because of things like Pokemon Pocket, and just because the game in general has grown so much over the last couple of years. Besides just collecting the cards, which can be very expensive, a lot of people are interested in learning how to play the game, or they started playing the game online. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with Pokemon Pocket. I think it translates over very well, but people just are kind of interested in general in learning the game, and a lot of times people don't really know where to get started. You can obviously play with any cards that you want to, but sometimes people want to just kind of know where is the best place to start, or what decks should I be using that are actually good in the game. Today I'm going to be 5 decks that I think are great decks to start out with if you're kind of new to the Pokemon TCG. These are all going to be decks that are pretty meta relevant. Some of them are at the top of the meta, other ones are just pretty decent decks overall that maybe have some bad matchups, but top players are still playing them. But before we talk about the 5 best decks to start out with, I'm going to show you the 5 worst decks to start out with if you're new to the Pokemon TCG. This is going to be very quick. I'm just going to quickly explain why I would stay away from each of these, just so you guys kind of have an understanding. I know a lot of times people, when they're new to the game, they're like, oh, I want to try this deck because it's my favorite Pokemon or whatever. You can always do that. There's no problem with that. But what I'm saying is that these decks, for whatever reason, I would kind of stay away from. And also, all the lists that I'm pulling from today are from the recent Smart TCG online tournament, big online tournament with hundreds of players. I'm just pulling the top deck list from each of these decks. Obviously, there's variations to each deck, so you guys can change whatever you want, but I'm just pulling these lists from that tournament. So the first deck I would stay away from if you're new is Grimmsnarl. This deck has been one of the better decks in the format right now, but there's a lot that goes on with this deck, and it can be very confusing, especially if you're a newer player. This is probably the worst deck to start out with. The reason I say that is because there's a lot of aspects about this deck that involve moving damage around, knowing your math, counting for math ahead of time. Like, it can be very complicated. I played this deck to a local and I didn't realize how much thinking is involved, like in person. And I think as a newer player, this is just kind of a bad play in general, because you have Monkey Dory here, which moves damage around everywhere across your board. You've also got the Grimmsnarl EX right here, which does damage to the active and puts damage on the bench. And you have the Frostlass here, which does damage each turn over time and adds 10 damage to every Pokemon with an ability. So just constant damage spreading. It can be very confusing and just overall a bad deck to play if you're a newer player. The other 2 decks that are kind of similar to this in a way that I would say are going to be Dragapults. This is a deck that again involves spreading damage across the board. I think Dragapult's a little bit easier to get into than Grimmsnarl because you can kind of learn the basics pretty quickly, I would say, but this one definitely has just a really big skill gap between like the best Dragapult players and newer Dragapult players, so it's just kind of a big learning curve. Especially the build here with Dusknoir, it can be kind of complicated because you're knocking yourself out and your opponent is taking prize cards, and if you don't really know what to do with that, it can be very complicated and you might not fully understand it yet. So I would kind of stay away from Dragapult. Again, you can play this one, but this is one that I would kind of stay away from for now. The other deck, like I mentioned, that's kind of like those 2 decks in a way is Gardevoir, which is arguably the best deck in the format right now. This is another Monkey Dory type of deck that involves spreading damage around, doing damage to yourself with Psychic Embrace here as you kind of accelerate energies. So again, just kind of a lot of thinking. As a newer player, you can play this deck. Like I said, you can play any deck that you want to, but I would stay away from it because I just think that there's a lot involved with moving the damage around and just kind of knowing what plays to go for. So I would personally stay away from this if you're a newer player, but if you want to play it, go ahead. Another deck I would stay away from is Flareon Box here, which is a deck that has been not really popular, but it's a really good deck, I think. It's just kind of underrated right now, but this is definitely a harder deck to play. A lot of people have said that about this deck, is that it's kind of a hard deck to play and kind of figure out. So that's why a lot of people don't play it, because at least with a deck like Gardevoir, Dragapult, or Grimmsnarl, they're kind of just better decks overall. So if you invest more time into those decks, you're going to get a higher payout than with a deck like this. Still a very solid deck, but just kind of overall pretty complicated with just a different mixture of attackers. And the last deck I would stay away from if you are a newer player is Crustle, and that's because we don't need any more Crustle players. Nah, I'm just kidding, but it's because this is a deck that is a very alternative win condition kind of deck. It's not hard to play. I wouldn't say that it's hard to play at all, but I think that if you're really trying to learn how the game works, for the most part, this is the deck I would stay away from because it kind of focuses and leans in onto like walling your opponent out, which is a legitimate strategy. But I think it'd be better to start out with a deck that kind of teaches more of the fundamentals, that kind of allows you to learn all the decks in general, rather than focusing on this strategy, which is kind of isolated and it's just own very simple deck. And now we have the 5 best decks to start out with if you are a newer player to the Pokemon TCG. I will say that with the last deck on this list, I'm going to kind of give a more detailed breakdown as to like how to really play the deck, just because it's a deck that I've been playing a lot lately and I've really been enjoying, and I honestly think it's the best deck to start out with if you are a new player. But I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the top 5 here that I think personally. First up, we do have Ethan's Typhlosion. This is a newer deck that's pretty much focused on a 1-prize Pokemon attacker, which is Typhlosion. So if your opponent knocks out the Typhlosion, they're only taking 1 prize card instead of 2, like they would for an EX Pokemon. This is a deck that's pretty straightforward overall, I would say. Your main attacker, really your only attacker in this deck, is going to be Typhlosion here with the Buddy Blast attack, which does 40 damage, but it also does 60 more damage for each Ethan's Adventure in your discard pile. Ethan's Adventure is the new supporter card with this deck. That is this one right here. So basically with the supporter card, it says search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon, Ethan's Pokemon, and basic fire energy cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So really a good card to just kind of get stuff out that you need, and just to kind of quickly get these supporter cards in your discard pile. That way you're doing as much damage as possible. If you get all 4 in the discard pile, you're hitting for 280 damage. But we do have other cards like Brave Bengal here, which allows you to do 30 more damage to EX Pokemon. That means that with all the Ethan's Adventures cards discarded, plus a Brave Bengal, you're hitting for 310 damage. And for those few Pokemon that have more than 310 HP, we do have the Victini here, which allows your Fire-type Pokemon to do 10 more damage. So you're capping out at 320 damage. Now this deck is really nice. It's really beginner friendly, I feel like, because you kind of have this built-in draw engine with Quilava, which allows you to search for an Ethan's Adventure card every single turn and put it into your hand. So basically what you want to do is set up all your Cyndaquils, evolve them all into Quilava, get all your Ethan's Adventure cards in hand, and then use cards like Secret Box to discard it. You can use cards like Earthen Vessel to discard them. You can use cards like Ultra Ball to discard them. You have plenty of cards that will allow you to discard them without having to play them. So basically by your 2nd or 3rd turn, you can already start attacking with this thing. Does pretty good damage overall. It knocks out most things in the format. And especially with the Victini and the Brave Bengal, you're basically knocking everything out in one hit except for like Charizard. But we do also have the Gravity Mountain, which makes stage 2 Pokemon have 30 less HP. So that means theoretically you could knock any single Pokemon out in the game. So it's really nice. This deck has a few different support options. I've seen builds with Dracloak, I've seen builds with Zoroark EX, I've also seen builds like this one which have Pidgeot EX. Just kind of a support card to kind of help support the deck. Again, the main attacker here is Ethan's Typhlosion. Everything else here is for support. So you can kind of choose which support option you like the most. But yeah, overall, very solid deck. I'm a big fan of this one. I've been playing it a lot recently, and I think it's a really good deck to get started with. Next up, we have Charizard EX. This is one of the first decks that I actually used to learn the Pokemon TCG when I started learning how to play. Again, this one does have that Pidgeot support option. And Pidgeot, if you don't know, it allows you to search for any card that you want in your deck every single turn. So a really good support option because you can search for exactly what you need. Every single turn you can get the exact card that you want. So it's just a really good option to have. Very important to get this thing set up because it kind of lets you play the game. But with this deck specifically, your main attacker is obviously going to be Charizard EX with the Infernal Rain ability. When you evolve this with the card in your hand, you're able to search your deck for 3 fire-type energies and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. Charizard EX does 180 damage. But for every prize card that your opponent has taken, you're doing 30 more damage. You're hitting for well over 300 damage by the end of the game, and you can pretty much knock anything out. There's a lot of stuff weak to dark right now, you know, Gardevoir, Mew, stuff like that. So it's a really powerful card that gets stronger as the game goes on. This build right here, it's kind of interesting. They're playing the Maximum Belt. I've seen a lot of other ace specs used, like Unfair Stamp and things like that. Maximum Belt basically allows you to hit EX Pokemon for 50 more damage, so you can kind of hit those numbers a little bit earlier in the game and just kind of take those early knockouts. This build also plays cards like the Chi-Yu here, which is really good against matchups like Gholdengo. because Gholdengo is weak to fire. Again, you can easily accelerate that energy with Charizard, and it allows you to do pretty decent damage overall, especially if something was knocked out previously. And then this deck has some other interesting support options like the Dunsparce, the Fezandipiti, the Cleffa, the Monkey Dory. I think is really interesting in this deck. Makes a lot of sense because you have Pidgeot to find that energy when you need it and kind of move damage back. You have 330 HP, so more than likely you're going to have damage on yourself that you can quickly move back. So yeah, this is one that's pretty straightforward. You want to get Charizard set up, you want to get Pidgeot set up, and once you have those two things set up, you're pretty much just knocking anything out. You can use Pidgeot to find boss's orders, Pidgeot to find counter catcher, to find really whatever it is that you need, and just kind of take knockouts pretty easily. After that, we do have Gholdengo here. This right here is the new consistency deck that a lot of people have been playing, arguably one of the better decks in the format. It just really got a huge buff in general with consistency with the new Genesect card that came out, the new Genesect EX. Basically with this deck, it's pretty straightforward. You want to just do as much damage as possible. You're able to do that with Gholdengo EX because you have Make It Rain, which does 50 damage times the amount of energies in your hand that you discard. So basically you want a bunch of energies in your hand so you can discard them and do as much damage as you need to. Has coin bonus as its ability, which allows you to draw a card, and if it's in the active spot, you could draw an extra card on top of that. You basically want to get 4 of these guys set up. You do that now with the new Genesect EX with the Metallic Signal ability, which allows you to search for 2 evolution metal Pokemon each turn. So basically that's how you get your Gholdengos. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, you have Scizor here, which is a good one prizer attacker that's able to kind of offset the prize trade. So a lot of times if you can knock something out with Scizor, go ahead and do it, because then they're kind of forced to either just take one prize card when they knock out Scizor, or have to kind of boss around and knock out one of your Gholdengos. So you always want to attack with Scizor when you can. And yeah, it's a pretty straightforward deck. It's built around the Energy Search Pro right here, which is the A spec that allows you to search for 1 of every type of energy. That's why you play all these different random energies. You've got stadiums in this deck like Levencia, which allows you to take 2 lightning energy from your discard and put them back into your hand. And we also run 4 copies of Superior Energy Retrieval, which allows you to discard 2 cards and pull 4 energies, put them back into your hand. So basically your goal here is set up all your Gholdengos, get all the energies in your hand, attack, use Superior Energy Retrieval, get them back, and attack again until you win the game. The other deck that's kind of similar in a way, that's another kind of straightforward, like do big damage kind of deck, is Raging Bolts. I do think it's gotten a little more complicated with the Noctowls now, but it's still pretty straightforward overall, I would say. With this deck, your main attacker here is going to be Raging Bolt EX, which has the Bellowing Thunder, which does 70 damage times the amount of basic energies that you discarded from your Pokemon. So not from your hand, from your Pokemon. So you're doing 70 damage for each energy that you discard. The way that we get energies across our board primarily is going to be Teal Mask Ogerpon EX here, which has the Teal Dance ability. So basically you're able to attach an energy for your turn, but with this ability you can attach another energy specifically to Teal Mask Ogerpon, and you can also draw a card for it. So just a really good draw engine, and you're also able to put extra energies on your board throughout your turn. Our other way to accelerate energy into play is Professor Sada's Vitality. You can choose 2 of your ancient Pokemon, has a little ancient sign up there. 2 of your ancient Pokemon, and attach a basic energy from your discard pile to each of them, and then you're also able to draw 3 cards for that. So you're basically able to accelerate those energies and also use Teal Dance to accelerate more energies, and you basically have energy spread out across your board so that whenever you're using Bellowing Thunder, you're hitting for more damage. What's nice about this build is that you do have the Noctowls here, so you do have the Jewel Seeker ability. So basically once during your turn, if you evolve your Pokemon and you have a Terra Pokemon in play like Teal Mask Ogerpon, you can search your deck for any 2 trainer cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So you can find your boss's orders, you can find your Nest Ball, your Prime Catcher, your Crispin, your Professor Sada's, whatever it is that you need, you are able to go ahead and pull that from the deck. So again, a nice support option here with Noctowl, a very strong attacker with Raging Bolts, and great support with the Teal Mask Ogerpon as well. And then you have all your other cards in the deck. The other strong attacker in this deck is the Baby Raging Bolt. So it's just a single prize attacker, but you're able to hit for 30 damage times the amount of energies attached to this Raging Bolt to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you're able to kind of snipe the bench, which can be very nice. it just kind of gives you more options in general, so just a really good attacker overall. Last deck I want to talk about here is Joltik Box. This is the deck that I've been playing a lot of, and I honestly think that if you are new to the TCG, that this is the deck to get started with because it's very straightforward, but it's very strong, and I think that it has a lot of great matchups right now, so it's a really good deck overall. The game plan is pretty simple, depending on what the matchups are. You know, you have different routes to kind of win the game, but overall you have a lot of very strong options with this deck. And yeah, I'll give a further breakdown in just a little bit here on the deck, but let me just kind of give you my initial thoughts on it. So this deck is all centered around Joltik right here with the Joltik Charge attack. So it allows you to attach up to 4 energies to your Pokemon, 2 Grass and 2 Lightning. So basically your turn 1, you want to get this thing into the active, you want to use this attack, and you want to accelerate all those energies into play. That way after your first turn, you're able to just start chaining knockouts. Your main attackers are going to be Iron Hands EX with Amp You Very Much, which does 120 damage, and it lets you take an extra prize card when you get a knockout. So you're able to basically just knock out these early baby, you know, basic Pokemon and take 2 prize cards very quickly. The other main attacker here is Pikachu EX, which has Topaz Bolt for 300 damage. It also has the Resolute Heart ability, which makes it to where that if you basically get hit for 200 damage or more, you're surviving any hit as long as you had full HP. You're surviving with 10 HP left. But basically it forces your opponent to kind of work around the Pikachu because it can survive pretty much any hit unless it had previous damage on it already. The consistency card that allows us to get all these Pokemon out is Miraidon EX. It has the Tandem Unit ability, so that allows you to search for 2 Lightning Pokemon and put them on your bench. And then we have a lot of our other standard support options here. I have a lot of good tech cards here, like the Galvantulus is a very strong single prize attacker that can hit for up to 180 damage if your opponent has an ability on it. It's really good in certain matchups that are weak to grass because you can just knock things out like Grimmsnarl or Charizard. Just a really good attacker overall. And the card that just came out that I've really been enjoying in the deck is the new Electric, which has Dynamotor. So once during your turn, you can attach a basic lightning energy from your discard pile to one of your benched Pokemon. So it's a really good card to just kind of make sure you never run out of energies, and it allows you to kind of power up an attacker as you're chaining knockouts without having to waste supporter cards or anything like that. We also have cards like Power Glass here, which allows you to attach an energy card from your discard pile to your active Pokemon after your turn is over. So again, you have options to just kind of keep energies into play and just kind of chain knockouts. And again, it just depends on the matchup. You know, if you're going against a deck with like bigger Pokemon, more HP, you're going to want to use Pikachu. If you're playing against a setup deck that needs time to evolve, you're going to want to use Iron Hands. You have Blood Moon Ursaluna here to kind of close out games and take knockouts. As you can see, I play 4 of most of these supporter cards because consistency, you know what I mean? So you can use Boss's Orders to bring anything in. You have Prime Catcher. Just a really good deck overall, I think, and I've just really been enjoying it. I think it's very straightforward, and I think that this is probably the best deck to get started with if you're new to the game. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump into it and kind of talk a little bit more about the deck. Alright, so Joltik Box right now is honestly probably my favorite deck to play. I usually play Dragapult, that's kind of like the main deck that I play, but I decided to give Joltik Box a go, and I've been playing it at locals, and it's been doing really well. A lot of the losses I've had just kind of felt like a little bit unlucky. I mean, there's kind of a difference when you lose games, right? Sometimes you feel unlucky, sometimes you feel you got outplayed, and then other times you kind of just know that like you just didn't know the matchup, or you know, you just played it badly, you know. With this deck, it's very consistent. There are certain matchups that are pretty tough, but for the most part, your matchups are pretty good across the board. And if you're going second, a lot of times you kind of have the advantage that you need. If you go first, things can be a little more tricky, but I'll kind of talk through here what the general kind of lines look like, just kind of how to pilot the deck a little bit better, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of an understanding of like how to actually play this deck. So obviously the start of the show here is Joltik with the 30 HP and the Jolting Charge attack, which allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic grass energy cards and 2 basic lightning energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. This thing right here is going to power everything up. So this right here, your first turn, it's most important to get this guy in the active spot and use that attack. That way you can kind of power everything else in the deck up. The way that we're able to kind of guarantee that we get this guy out is by getting Miraidon EX out. So you always want to grab Miraidon. Let's say you get a Nest Ball, an Ultra Ball, you know, you don't have Joltik on the board. You don't want to use that to get Joltik. You want to use that to get Miraidon EX because of its Tandem Unit ability, which allows you to search for 2 lightning Pokemon. So that means that you can grab a Joltik, and you can also grab one of your other attackers like Pikachu EX. And that also means that the next turn and any other turn in the game, you can continue to use that ability to get more attackers out. Aside from Joltik and Miraidon, I'm going to kind of explain the other Pokemon in this deck. First up, I'm going to talk about our main attackers, and that's going to be Pikachu EX and also Iron Hands EX. So these are really good cards. They complement each other very well because they're very different. So depending on the matchups, the more you kind of play the game, the more you kind of figure out what's going to work better. You'll kind of figure out which attacker is best for the matchup. So Pikachu EX is here to hit a lot of the bigger Pokemon. It's got 300 as its attack. It can knock out a lot of Pokemon in the format. We can also play other cards like Gravity Mountain and Vitality Band to do a little bit more extra damage to really knock out the stuff that we need to. But it also has the Resolute Heart ability, which basically makes it to where it cannot be knocked out if it's at full HP. So again, very strong ability, very strong attack. Very good against certain matchups. I think, honestly, I've heard that Gholdengo is a bad matchup. But I think if you go double Pikachu, it's pretty solid because they have no way to really respond with a knockout. And you're able to just kind of one-shot every single Gholdengo. So certain matchups is very good against. For other ones, you're going to want to use Iron Hands. This is going to be against a lot of the Stage 2 decks, the slower decks that play a lot of low HP basic Pokemon. So like Dragapult, Grimmsnarl, Gardevoir, even like Typhlosion, for example. You've got Amphiberry Much, which does 120 damage. And the benefit of it is it allows you to take an extra prize card when you get a knockout. So this is a card that if you power it up turn 1, basically you're able to start swinging for 2 prizes every single turn until they knock this thing out. And by the time they knock it out, you're going to slowly start adding energies to your Pikachu or your Ursaluna or whatever it is that's on your bench and use that to clean up the game. So this is a very powerful attacker. I also forgot to mention that we have Galvantula. This is a very good card right here. It's a single prize card, which means that if your opponent knocks it out, they're only taking 1 prize card. So it's a very solid attacker, especially against things like Grimmsnarl and Charizard and Zoroark, these cards that are weak to grass. It allows you to basically one-shot them without having to worry about, them taking 2 prizes if they knock this thing out. It does 50 damage, plus 80 if you have a lightning energy attached, plus 50 more if your opponent has an ability. So that means against cards like Grimmsnarl, this thing is hitting for 180 damage times 2. You're hitting for 360 damage, getting the instant knockout. So what's really good about this is that depending on the matchup, you're going to want to keep Joltik alive, and sometimes we can do that with Bravery Charm. It really kind of depends, again, on the matchup, because sometimes they have a way to respond and knock Joltik out. Other times they don't. But if against things like Charizard and Grimmsnarl, honestly, what I like to do sometimes is I like to set up both of my Joltiks because the deck does play 2 Joltiks. So I like to have 2 on my board in case they knock out the one that used Jolting Charge. You're able to set up that Galvantula on the bench, and it kind of forces them in an awkward position to where they either need to focus on knocking out the Galvantula and taking 1 prize, or they focus on a 2 prizer, but now Galvantula is moving up to the active and it's knocking you out. So it kind of puts them in a sticky situation where it kind of forces them to figure out what they want to knock out. So I think it's a really good card in certain matchups. Our other big attacker here is Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. This is a very, very solid card. I've seen some people playing the new Zekrom EX. I don't really agree with it. I think that Ursaluna is the better option. The downside is it hits for 240, which is not enough to knock certain things out. But you can still kind of set up to where you can close games out with this thing by mixing in the Galvantula to do the extra damage, or doing different things basically to kind of set up that NKO. The reason why I say that I like Blood Moon Ursaluna better is because a lot of times, especially if you're using like Pikachu and stuff, a lot of times you find yourself kind of low on energies. This deck doesn't play a lot of recovery cards, so unless you have stuff like the new Electric with Dynamotor, or you're playing more recovery cards or things like that, sometimes it can be kind of tricky with the energies to really power up that final attack. And with Blood Moon Ursaluna, this thing right here basically is just a free attacker at the end of the game. You only need to attach like 1 energy, and that's pretty much it. And you're able to hit for crazy damage. So this is a really good card to kind of close games out. Last attacker I want to mention here is one that I haven't seen in every single build of Joltik Box. Some people have definitely been cutting it, but I'm a big fan of it. It's the Iron Leaves EX. It does have the Rapid Vernier ability, which means that if you're playing this card from your hand onto your bench, you're able to move any energies on your board to this card and move the Pokemon into the active spot. So again, against things like Grimmsnarl, against things like Charizard, you're just one-shotting them instantly pretty much. What I do also like about this card is that it allows you to kind of switch in against things that kind of like to control you and like, you know, make you stay in place with attacks like corner, for example, where you can't retreat. You can use Iron Leaves to kind of pivot out. I've even found myself, you know, if I have a really bad starting hand and I start with Ursaluna, if I have a way to get Iron Leaves and let's say my Latias is prized, then it kind of allows me to switch in, and then now my retreat cost is only 1 instead of 3. So it can be kind of a good card to like pivot and stuff, but ultimately it's a decent attacker. It does 180 damage, mostly going to be important for things like Grimmsnarl and things like that. Last up are the 3 support Pokemon here. We got Pheasantipede, Mew, and Latias. Latias, very important card, allows you to retreat for free. If you're a basic Pokemon, it feels really bad when you prize this card, and you have something like Ursaluna or like Iron Hands in the active spot. So it can be very good to get those things out. This is a card that a lot of times I like to try to keep it in my hand. I don't like to play it unless I have to. But sometimes you kind of just have to, you know what I mean? It's just, it just feels kind of bad sometimes to have to play it. But in a deck like this where you're running all EX Pokemon, it doesn't feel that bad. Mew right here does have the option to attack if you can power it up, depending on the matchup. I haven't really found myself attacking with it too often. You mostly have it here for restart, which allows you to draw cards until you have 3 in your hand. So just a really good card to kind of ensure that you always have a hand. It's very important to play it down because if you get Iono'd or something like that, your hand gets disrupted or you're not really drawing the cards you need. A lot of times having Mew here will kind of get you out of situations, so very important card for that. And last up is Pheasantipede EX. This is a card that's found in like most decks, so whenever you get knocked out by your opponent, you get to draw 3 cards on your next turn. So again, just a great resource to be able to draw more cards. 3 energies we run in this deck are Grass, Lightning, and Metal. I've got 5 Grass, I've got 6 Lightning, and 2 Metal. Metal is for the Pikachu, obviously, and then Electric right here, or Lightning, is for basically everything else. Grass, kind of the same thing. You can use that to power up everything else. So again, the energy counts I've been kind of seeing standard across the board. Some builds of this deck still run the Clefairy with the Psychic Energy. I cut it because I feel like it takes up too many deck spaces, but that's just me. And I'm not going to go too much into detail about how all the other cards work in this deck, but basically what you need to know is that this deck is really focused on consistency. So a lot of cards here are kind of just built to make sure that you are able to play the game, because once you get set up, like it's pretty much just a race to the end to try to take the prize cards first. So again, this deck is very straightforward, I feel like. I feel like the game plan is simple. You just have to kind of learn what it is for each specific matchup. And once you kind of learn that, you know exactly what you need to do. And it's all about, can you get set up first and can you start taking those prizes early? I run 4 of a lot of these supporters. So like 4 Arven, which allows you to get items and tool cards. 4 Boss's Orders, which allows you to basically bring in anything that you want. 4 Pokegears, this allows you to find your supporter cards. And then, of course, we have our tool cards, Prime Catcher, all that kinds of stuff. If you guys have any specific questions about this deck or the cards that I chose to include, let me know in the comments below. I could definitely kind of give a more detailed breakdown or even make a whole separate video about Joltik Box. Because, again, I'm really enjoying the deck and I'm liking it a lot. I do want to point out right now, I do have the Genesect, the baby one, in my deck. I plan on taking this out. Right now, I ordered the new Electric Dynamo. It hasn't come in the mail yet, so for right now I'm playing the Genesect in here instead, with an extra tool card. But I do think that the Electric and the Dynamo are really good inclusions in this deck. I think it allows you to make sure that you never run out of energy, and it kind of lets you silently power things up on the bench to kind of just allow you to continue attacking and really never run out of energy. All right, so what I want to do right now is I want to show you guys kind of like a starting opening hand here and how I would basically set up with this deck. Again, you want to always go turn 2, you always want to go second, just because if you go second, it allows you to go for Jolting Charge and get set up, and then basically by your second turn, you're able to start attacking. So you always want to go second if you have the option. It feels pretty bad. Oops, that card was upside down, I think. It always feels pretty bad to, why are these upside down? To have to go first, especially in certain matchups, it feels really bad at times. So you always want to try to go second. That's just kind of the ideal way to play with this deck. The bad thing is a lot of other decks want to go second as well. Or if they know that you're playing this deck, they know that you want to go second. Sometimes you are going to have to go first. But we're going to pretend like I'm going second. And let's go ahead and see what my starting 7 cards are and how we would set up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got the Miraidon, we got the Arven. This is actually like a perfect hand. So obviously we're going to start Miraidon here. Let's go ahead and set our prize cards out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's go ahead and draw our card for our turn, which is an energy card. So not bad at all. So in this situation, what do we want to do here? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use Miraidon's ability, Tandem Unit. That way I can kind of look through my deck here and kind of get a good look and figure out like, okay, what's prized. I'm not going to do all that right now as far as like prize checking and everything, but a lot of times this is a good opportunity to kind of see, okay, like what is prized in my deck. In this case, we obviously want to grab our Joltik. And then again, depending on the matchup, you're going to figure out what is it that you want to grab next to that. Let's say I'm playing up against Dragapult, for example, and they have kind of a bad turn one, and I just want to take advantage of that. I know that they don't play rare candies really or anything like that. I'm going to want to grab Iron Hands because it kind of just allows me to get set up a lot faster and just start taking prize cards right off the bat. We're going to go ahead and do that. And then looking at our hand, we got to attach our Grass Energy to Joltik. That way we can Jolting Charge when it's time. Turn one, you pretty much always want to go for Arven, so I'm not going to use my Pokegear just yet. I'm just going to go ahead and go for Arven. We can grab a tool card, and we can also grab an item card. So this is interesting because you have some options here. You could go for a Nest Ball and grab Latios. I am going to grab a Nest Ball, but I'm not going to grab Latios because I can also grab a tool card. And I also want to make sure that my bench is just kind of set up right now. So what I'm going to grab instead, unless I prized it, I might have actually prized it. Did I prize it? I think I prized my air balloon. Yeah, I think I did. Okay, so never mind. I prized my air balloon, so it's looking like I kind of have to grab Latios if I want to attack this turn. The good thing is we didn't prize both, but this is why it's important to have options. So I'm going to grab the Nest Ball. And then for my tool card, really doesn't matter too much. I think in this case, I'm probably just going to grab Bravery Charm, just so I kind of have it. But just so you know, I would have grabbed Air Balloon, and then what I would have done was grab Nest Ball to put something down like Mew so I can continue to draw cards. In this case, since I prized the Air Balloon, I have to grab Latios if I want to attack this turn. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to grab Latios from this Nest Ball. He's going to go in the discard pile. This Bravery Charm is going to go back to my hand. And then we are going to shuffle the deck from there. Now again, depending on the matchup, and the more you play, the more you kind of figure this stuff out. You'll kind of see, I know I'm doing a bad job of shuffling right now, but I'm going to go through this fast. Depending on the matchup, you'll kind of know what it is that you want to do. So let's say I'm playing against Dragapult, like I said. A lot of times they play Badoo to kind of slow you down. So in that case, if I know they have Badoo, and there's a good chance that they're going to use Badoo on me, I'm going to go ahead and use my Pokegear this turn while I still can. Usually you want to wait to use it, that way you draw more cards out and you're more likely to hit a supporter. But in this case, if I know that they're going to use Badoo to item lock me, I'm going to go ahead and use this right now. That way I can just get a supporter in my hand. I'm going to grab this Crispin, and that way next turn I have some more options. I've got Crispin now, I've got Iono, I've got all kinds of stuff. So that I'm going to go ahead and retreat. Jolting Charge. And in this case, since I have no other attackers and they had kind of a bad setup, I'm just going to put all 4 in Iron Hands here. And basically, what that means is that next turn, while they're still not fully set up, I can just easily retreat, go Iron Hands, and just knock out whatever it is that they have. So again, very kind of basic turn 1 right there. For yourself, especially if you're going second. Again, depending on the matchup, you'll decide if you want Iron Hands, if you want Pikachu EX, or whatever. And again, if I wouldn't have prized this Air Balloon, that's the tool card I would have grabbed. That way I could have used that Nest Ball to put something down like Mew and make sure I have some kind of draw power on the bench, or even possibly put down Pikachu and kind of spread those energies out a little bit better. So that's kind of what I would have done, but that right there is kind of your ideal turn 1 and what it should look like for this deck. Well, thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a thing or two. Go ahead and let me know in the comments which deck you plan on playing. I'll also have the lists in the description below for the 5 decks that I recommended. So if you want to get started, that's a great place to kind of look and test out these decks. And again, if you guys want any guides or any more explanations or anything like that for these decks, just go ahead and let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to respond. But that's going to be it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.